My name is Victoria Millar, and I'm a Senior Curator of History at National Museums NI. Today, I'm going to be talking about Reawakening the Ulster Folk Museum, which is an ambitious development project that we've been recently embarking upon at one of our 4 museum sites. I've been working for National Museums NI for almost 6 years, and for almost 5 of those now, I've been the Senior Curator of History for our 2 open-air museums, the Ulster Folk Museum at Cultra and the Ulster American Folk Park in Omagh. You can see the location of the Ulster Folk Museum, the subject of this session, on this slide, situated a few miles outside of Belfast. This year marks the 60th anniversary of the Ulster Folk Museum. It opened in 1964 with just 2 exhibit buildings, Duncron Cottier's House and Coal Island Spade Mill, as well as exhibitions in Cultra Manor, which had been purchased as part of a 136-acre estate in 1961 for the purpose of establishing the museum. Since then, the museum has greatly expanded, as you can see from our map, and today we have over 50 exhibit buildings on site, split between a town and a rural area. Our collections, broadly split into 3 key areas of agriculture, domestic life, and costume and textiles, have also developed significantly over this time. They are complemented by our library and archive holdings, which include an extensive questionnaire collection and a sizable sound archive. All of the buildings in the open-air museum are furnished as they would have appeared in the early 1900s. The visitor's journey is enhanced by visitor guides, first-person interpreters, and craft demonstrators, all in replica historic dress inspired by our collections. And we also have a number of heritage breeds on site, which are looked after by our dedicated farming team. Despite all of this great work, in the last 20 years or so, the museum's experienced a period of stagnation, with no major development works since the completion of the Guildford complex in 2007, which saw the opening of a picture house, period tea rooms, a draper's shop, a dispensary, and a hardware shop. The last exhibit building to be relocated to the museum was in 2010, moreover. Within the last couple of years, we've embarked upon an ambitious £50 million Reawakening project. It's envisaged that the museum will become a thriving creative hub, transforming into a public forum where people can share, learn, and create together. We hope that by capitalising on the museum's collections, people, and expertise, new exhibition spaces, and enhanced interpretation across the site, we will equip people to connect with the past, make sense of the present, and build the future. In doing so, we will redefine the Ulster Folk Museum as a heritage and environmental resource, open to all, to explore the depths of our shared heritage and cultural diversity and its relevance to our lives today. So what will all of this ultimately look like? We've been working with Hoskins Architects and Ralph Applebaum Associates on the design and development of a series of sustainable buildings and carefully placed interventions across the site. And in December 2023, we reached the end of REBA Stage 3, Spatial Coordination. The following images that I'm going to show you are artists' impressions that we received as part of REBA Stage 3. These may be subject to change, but hopefully they will give you a feel for what's to come. The first building that's being proposed is the Culture Hub. This will welcome and orientate visitors, establish the museum's ethos, and celebrate our collections through permanent and temporary exhibitions, which we're currently lacking. This image shows the approach to the Culture Hub building from the new visitor car park. Getting slightly closer, you can get a better sense of the architecture of the building, with the entrance towards the left-hand side. Moving inside the building, the hearth will form the centrepiece of the Culture Hub. Niches carved into the hearth will house hundreds of objects from our collections, creating a 3D tapestry showing the breadth and diversity of Ulster's heritage. The designers have proposed unusual object compositions to grab visitors' attention. A series of discovery drawers around the hearth will give visitors an opportunity to discover light-sensitive objects. Oral histories from the museum's extensive sound archive will be heard at specific moments around the hearth, personalising the objects with more emotion and meaning. On the upper level of the Culture Hub, visitors will be able to step inside the hearth. This space will be enclosed and intimate. Oral histories will be woven into a poetic soundtrack that will accompany a selection of more sensitive items in the collections, such as straw work and textiles. A series of islands will also be located on the upper floor of the Culture Hub. They will be an active resource used by a diverse range of people to learn, engage, and celebrate Ulster's living, making, and growing traditions, past and present. The content of these will be co-produced and co-created with the museum's partners, from religious bodies to creative artists. The upper level of the Culture Hub will also be a place where visitors can orientate themselves with the open-air museum. Visitors will be met with a vast model of the museum split into town and rural. The model will mark out which activities, makers, and demonstrators are on site that day, helping visitors to plan their visit. The Culture Hub will also house a temporary exhibition gallery and a large event space on the upper floor, as well as a group room on the ground floor, which you can see here. Exiting out of the Culture Hub, visitors will make their way towards the Industry Zone, which will exhibit the Ulster Museum's industrial collections, which are currently in storage. The building will sit opposite an existing row of houses that originally came from T Lane off Sandy Row in Belfast. They were originally built for workers in the nearby textile mills and brickfields. Here we can see a close-up of the entrance to the Industry Zone, with some of our other exhibit buildings in view, including the corner shop on the left and our Temperance Hall on the right. Moving into the upper floor of the Industry Zone, a line of 4 tables will stretch along the mezzanine. Each will have a stylised diorama of a streetscape, complete with vignettes of activity showing changes over time, from the mid-19th century to modern day, effectively acting as a 3D visual timeline demonstrating the growth and decline of industrialisation. The lower floor of the Industry Zone will be split into 7 themes: introduction and clocking in, powering Ulster, engineering, linen, shipbuilding, rope making, and import-export. Oh, sorry. Somehow exited the presentation. Flip back to the next one. There we are. Exiting the Industry Zone, the Temperance Hall, which currently operates as the museum's shop, will be transformed into a family craft hall. Our former residential spaces, which were used by schools for overnight stays, particularly during the Troubles meanwhile, will be repurposed as craft workshops. Our learning courtyard, which is primarily used by schools, will also undergo development. You can see one of the proposed redeveloped spaces here. The existing open-air museum will be furnished with a new suite of interpretive signage, a selection of which you can see on this slide. Next, you can see how the interpretive signage will perhaps be used both outside and inside our exhibit buildings. Reimagined visitor routes, meanwhile, will enable visitors to experience more of the natural beauty of the site. So where are we now? As of REBA Stage 3, the estimated project cost is £53 million. We've secured development funding of over £1 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to progress the development plans to date. Full planning permission was granted by Ards and North Down Borough Council in December 2023. Now that planning permission is in place, we're actively pursuing a fundraising strategy. Whilst that's ongoing, Work continues, as always, to ensure the long-term preservation of the open-air museum. Maintaining over 50 buildings is no easy feat. Most recently, we reopened our blacksmith's house, which underwent an interior refresh, images of which you can see on the left-hand side. Prior to that, Crooked Claddy farmhouse was refreshed in advance of a Homes and Focus talk I gave to visitors about the house. Images of this house can be seen in the middle. And on the left, you can see a couple of images of Duncron Cottier's house, which was refreshed in advance of another Homes and Focus talk I gave. And coincidentally, I should say, Duncron Cottier's house was the first house to open at the museum back in 1964. So that's brought me about quite full circle. Before I finish my presentation, I'd like to draw your attention to a PhD opportunity that we've got available at the moment in partnership with the School of Museum Studies at the University of Leicester. It's also funded by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council. It's very much interlinked with the Reawakening plans and is entitled A Tragedy Not to Preserve Now While There Is Still Time, the Establishment of a Folk Museum for Ulster, 1929 to 1964. The title comes from a 1954 report, which was drawn up by a committee under the chairmanship of Sir Roland Nugent, Speaker of the Senate, at the request of the Minister of Finance, Mr. Brian McGuinness, to consider the establishment of an Ulster Folk Museum. Within the report, it states, "It would, in our opinion, be a tragedy not to pursue now, while there is still time, surviving examples of Ulster way of life as it has been developed through the years." Research questions as part of the PhD will establish how various factors, from key supporters to political events, influence the museum's trajectory, and consideration will be given to how these findings can help inform the museum's strategic approach in the 21st century. Applications close on the 20th of May, 2024. So if you can, please share amongst your networks. It would be greatly appreciated. Hopefully that's provided you with a brief overview of our Reawakening plans. I'd love to hear any thoughts, and I would be also happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you. I'll just unshare my screen here so that we can chat. There we go.
That was super. Thank you, Victoria. A really fascinating project that you've got underway, and no mean feat to kind of pull all those different strands together. It sounds amazing, your ambition for the project. I'm going to jump in just because I'm here. I've got a question about your so you've got some lovely new interpretation that you're planning on putting across the site, and I guess that's to draw everything together. What sort of level of interpretation do you currently have within those recreated spaces and buildings?
So in the exhibit buildings at the minute, we have sort of small interpretive panels. They sit usually either on the windowsill of a building or maybe on a table in the building. So it is quite limited in terms of what we can say. They cover quite a lot of information, even despite their small size. So usually in the corner, you'll find a little map of Ulster, and there'll be a mark on the map to show where the building originally came from. It's also mentioned the date of the building, as well as when the building came to the museum. And then there's usually a bit of history about the building and the inhabitants, but it is quite limited in terms of what we can do on that small panel. So what we do try to do to counteract that is we do have a lot more resources available on our website. So we'll go take a deeper dive into the history of certain buildings or the families that lived in them, which can be a sort of useful addition to have for people who want to take a bit more of a deeper look at the buildings that we hold. The map, as I showed on the slide, one of the first couple of slides there, it basically tells you where you can find the buildings and what activities will be happening on site. But we don't have on the actual map, details about the actual buildings. So the new interpretation, hopefully, it'll give us a greater amount of space, to talk about the buildings and as well as the site. Because there isn't much interpretation as you go around the site. and the natural environment and things like that. So hopefully these new interventions will help us to kind of interpret that a bit more than we have at present.
And was that originally an intention that it kind of should feel sort of less like displays with interpretation, or is it's just how it's
No, I
grown
think
up?
it was always planned out that way, that it wasn't meant to be, it was meant to feel like you were going to walk
You're going
into
someone's home,
someone's house or workspace. So that would be the same as what we'd want to emulate. We would, if anything, we'll be putting maybe one intervention in per house. We wouldn't want it to overpower the feel of the house as you go in. So it is meant to be quite to give you the experiences if you're walking around a rural environment and happening upon these houses and happening upon these workplaces and things. So it is quite relaxed in that regard, that you're not getting bombarded, with too much interpretation either. So we will want to have a balance, that we don't kind of oversaturate, when we are putting these newer interventions in.
Super. I can see we're already getting questions in the chat. Richard, would you like to by all means ask your question, or we can put it forward. And if anyone else wants to come in, please do.
Yes, I was just wondering what the current annual visitor numbers were and predicted visitor numbers after the development.
Yeah, I don't have the actual predicted numbers for myself because I'm in curatorial, but usually we would have around, I'm saying, I think off the top of my head, around 100,000 a year. And that would include obviously visitors, but also our school visits and things like that. I don't know, that would be another department that would deal with kind of the projected visitor numbers, after the new interventions would go in. But I presume, there is obviously the expectations that through these new interventions, in terms of we've got, the craft spaces and so forth, and sort of refurbished education spaces and so on, that capacity will increase, and then by in turn visitor numbers, there'll be more people hopefully coming back for various visits to engage with the museum on different topics and different themes. So yes, the expectation is, and the hope is, that visitor numbers will increase as a result of the work that we're going to be doing on site.
And I'm guessing it's about widening the types of visitors that you might be able to engage with through those new displays as well. Is it about attracting particular new audiences? So you mentioned sort of
Ideally,
schools and those group settings and group
yeah,
rooms that you had, yeah.
We would have quite a lot of schools, and we'd also have quite a lot of family groups. And what you would find is people would visit the museum at various stages in their life, maybe when they're at school, when they've had their own families, or when they've had grandchildren. So what we're hoping to encourage is that people do come more than that, and that they don't come in various life stages only, and that they come more frequently to the museum to engage in various workshops or activities that we have put on. And that kind of interlinks with our programming, which we have been sort of reviewing over the last few years, about different programs that will attract different audiences. So we've been trialing and testing that over the last few years, kind of in advance of all of this work, that's planned to be happening on site, to see, what audiences are interested in, and yeah, all that kind of is going towards, the final product, really. Mm-hmm.
And were there any surprises in what people were asking for, or were they?
Not really, not off the top of my head. Again, I don't work in programming necessarily, but everything that we have been putting on seems to have, attracted audiences. There's been some nice foraging workshops, for example, that maybe didn't offer before, that people have really responded to, and they're kind of being scheduled in on sort of a quarterly basis now. So people are coming back, for events that they quite like, have maybe participated in once. We're seeing then people coming back for the next one on offer. And we do a lot of programming around sort of seasonal events and things like that. So it's just about ensuring that those events are, as good as they can be, and making sure that they're improved upon year on year. So yeah, no, it's going well so far, and we're getting good feedback from what we are putting on. And for my side of things, it's sort of putting on more programming around the different buildings. So I'm doing, as I mentioned, the Homes in Focus series, which is sort of taking a deeper dive into the buildings. And then last weekend, I did a women folk event, which was sort of looking at women's stories associated with the buildings on site. And then we also had a all-female trad session in the pub. So that again was well attended, and yeah, we're looking to kind of do more themed events like that as time goes on.
The foraging sounds fascinating as well. You mentioned sort of heritage and environmental. Is it kind of about expanding some of the sort of the remit of the museum to explore different things that might attract audiences that maybe don't have an immediate connect with some of the room settings, some of the houses and the industries? It's about sort of widening that scope, I guess, is it?
Yeah, it's because we are set in, quite a large landscape here, well over 100 acres, and it's sort of bringing in people's awareness of the site in which we've built the museum, highlighting more around our heritage breeds and the work of our farming team. In the last few years, we've welcomed the Conservation Volunteers, which is sort of a national organisation who do a lot of gardening and planting on site. So the volunteer numbers have increased as a result of that. And it's about encouraging people then, to kind of get their hands dirty and get involved in, maybe planting something, or as part of our harvest festival, people can have a go at like picking potatoes and things like that, and giving them more of a hands-on experience. And then we're trying to sort of encourage people to think about, some of the learnings they can take away from what they find at the museum, that betters their own lives in terms of maybe sustainability at home or growing your own and things like that. Just so that the museum's kind of offering them something that they can improve their own lives with. So all that, it really is interconnected, with the outdoor environment that we're based in. So definitely that is a big factor about, offering, yes, the heritage side of things, but definitely increasing, the environmental awareness and on what the museum can offer in that regard as well.
That's fascinating. Please do put your virtual hand up, put your camera on, wave erratically at the camera if you've got any queries, or else I will just keep asking questions that come to me. But Victoria, you mentioned the co-production, co-creation elements as well. So is that something that's kind of still very early days, of their particular groups and communities that you're looking to specifically work on to kind of draw out different stories from your collection?
Yeah, it is quite early days still, so we haven't kind of got into that detail yet, but there are certain organisations, as I say, there could be some religious groups, might be, say, for example, the Catholic Church, or some of the fraternal organisations that exist within Northern Ireland, like the Orange Order and so forth, engaging those different groups about the heritage that we actually hold, in the museum. We have collections pertaining to say, the fraternal organisations or religious groups, or it could be inviting artists in to respond to our collections. We have a lot of material, a lot of craft material, for example, that were made, by, say, blacksmiths or basket weavers and things like that. So inviting people in to respond to the collections as well, because we do want it to be a lot more of an open environment for people to be aware of what our collections consist of. So we are trying to increase our profile on our website through our collections online to better reflect what's in the stores here. We're also offering now public tours of the stores. So there's one actually coming up this Friday for the public. They can book on and have a look around the stores and what's sort of off display at the minute. And again, through hopefully the new exhibition spaces, we'll be able to get more of the collections out there. Because visitors only see a proportion of what we have in the collections in the open air museum. So having a exhibition space that's environmentally controlled and so forth will enable us to display objects that we can't at present, just due to the environmental conditions in the outdoor museum. So yeah, all of that, hopefully that'll all go to making the collections more accessible and raising the awareness amongst the public.
It sounds like you've got some fantastic plans on getting more on display. So the industrial collections currently aren't on display at all, or?
No, they used to be on display in the Ulster Museum, but when the Ulster Museum underwent refurbishment over 10 years ago, most of them came off display and now are in storage. So my colleague, who's the other Senior Curator of History, she's responsible for the industry collection, so she'll be heavily involved in the industry zone and what that will look like. But the plan is to put on display a lot of the material that was once on display in the Ulster Museum, bringing that out to public view again. Because again, with a lot of them behind the scenes in storage, access is quite limited to the public at the minute. So it'll be great to have a space where we can have those objects out and display again and sort of celebrate that history. And it does tie in very nicely with the tea lane houses I mentioned earlier about a lot of the people who lived in those houses, were connected through the textile industry and rope making industries and things. So having that kind of correlation between the collections and the new sort of exhibit building versus the houses that we have on site already, it'll be a nice sort of marriage between the two that will be very close proximity to one another.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Just absolute admiration to embark on such an amazing project, because it sounds fascinating to sort of see how all the different strands are sort of coming together. And obviously you're relatively early days, although quite advanced at Reba 3 to have those plans in things. So thank you for taking the time. Helen, come on in.
Hello. Hi, Victoria.
Hi.
I work at the Highland Folk Museum, so it's really interesting to see a museum of a similar type, open air. We're about 80 acres and have got kind of just over 30 historic buildings, and a store here, which we do lead store tours of on a weekly basis to try and kind of open up that access to our collections. But I was just wondering a couple of questions. Do you open year round, or are you seasonal?
Yeah, we open year round. All of National Museum's NI sites close on a Monday, so we are closed to the public on a Monday, and that enables us to do certain things, with the exhibit buildings and maybe the farming team needing to come in and do sort of larger scale works. But we are open year round. And am I right? You are seasonal, aren't you? Because I think I've looked you up before, and then
seasonal.
Summer months really are the key, sort of spring into autumn.
So we open at the beginning of April through to the end of October, just because we couldn't stay open in a Highlands winter. We wouldn't get the visitor figures to justify the wages for the salaries of the staff, and also just that we have to do so much maintenance over the winter. And the site itself, it would be too muddy and snowy and icy, and we have to put all the buildings to bed every season. So we have to recruit all the seasonal staff every year, which is quite a big job, taking on about 35 people for visitor services and historical interpretation. But the other question that I had was about the demonstrators and traditional crafts that you show on site. Do you struggle to recruit those positions and find the demonstrators, or do you have quite a healthy pool of people showing things like, is it rope making and basketry and smithy? Yeah.
Relatively sort of been quite lucky in that regard. We do have a number of demonstrators that have been at the museum for many years. So we have a blacksmith who's been here many years, and we have recently appointed another blacksmith who's got his own skill set, but also is training with the blacksmith that's been here for many years. So they're sort of learning from each other, sort of between themselves. We have a linen weaver, a tweed weaver, two tweed weavers, again, sort of learning from each other. We've got a printer, and again, someone else who was in our sort of front of house position is now learning under him. So usually it tends to be like that, where someone will learn under someone who's been there for a longer period of time before they may eventually retire. We also have a basket weaver. I think those are our main ones that are on site, and they're all sort of paid positions. None of them are volunteers. The same would apply to our visitor guides and the front of house. They're all paid members of staff. And then we would have volunteers maybe assisting with seasonal events and things like that, or wayfinding. But all of the other positions are paid positions.
That's brilliant. And you've always got something on every day, so visitors can see at least one or two crafts happening.
Yeah,
Is that right?
There's an A board outside the shop, and it will say what's on today, and it might say like basket maker, and then the number where you can find the basket maker. So yeah, they'll always have at least one or two demonstrations happening per day, so that it's, yeah, you'll always see at least a few. Last year the programming team put together a making festival, and they're doing it again this year. And it's looking at various heritage and sort of contemporary crafts. So it's sort of bringing in obviously our demonstrators, but it's also bringing in other craft practitioners through the craft NI here, and various people come in and sort of showcase their own crafts. And then we will showcase certain activities that we don't normally do on a day, just because we don't have that craft normally represented. So that's something that sort of is an add-on for visitors. I must say, Helen, I was hoping maybe at some point to connect with yourself, because we are exploring sort of our Ulster Scots connections in our collections relating to Ulster Scots, and it would be good to kind of like sound out what you may have in your collection and vice versa. And I think I read a while ago about one of your houses maybe having marram grass as thatch.
Yes.
And we have one that, although it's not marram grass now, it used to be marram grass on it. So there's some correlations there, I think, between maybe our buildings and your buildings, maybe.
Yeah. Well, actually, the one that was thatched in marram grass is now, it didn't really work so well, so it's now been thatched in the more local material of heather. But it was kind of experimental archaeology, and it was great to try it, and it didn't really work for our climate, and it wasn't quite thick enough, so we learned. But yeah, definitely, I can put my email address in the chat.
Great. Yeah,
if you want to take a note of that.
But
yeah, that would be great to link up.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
I'm interested, Helen, do you have demonstrators at Highland Folk Museum, or is that something you always struggle to maintain, or kind of?
Yeah,
I'm guessing they're few and far between generally.
They are, and we struggle in general, just being in quite a rural location here, kind of having the right skills to kind of showcase a wide variety of crafts. But in the township, so our recreated 1730s township, we have a good, well, we've got an amazing member of staff who's been with us for a number of years, who's paid seasonal staff, and she does spinning and dyeing and weaving. So that's amazing. She kind of covers early textile crafts. And then we do have volunteers that help us out as well. So we've got someone who's based in the Smiddy, kind of as and when he can. So it's certainly not something that we can offer every day for visitors. We have other volunteers that show people how coracles were used, and they've built coracles and take them out on the pond when that's possible to do. And we have other things. So throughout the summer holiday period, we'll have one day a week, which is Heritage in Action Day, where we'll try and kind of, put as many things on as possible on that day, so at least visitors know to come that day of the week to see more than they would usually be able to see, because we just don't have within our paid team the skills there and the budget there. It really does come down to budget as well. And also just keeping those skills alive. We'd love to have people demonstrating a lot more crafts, but it's not that readily available. So we kind of do what we can with a small team and a small budget and a seasonal museum to showcase as much craft as possible. And we have within our team as well a thatcher. So we've got permanent member of staff who's the craft supervisor, who does the traditional maintenance of the thatched buildings. So yeah, we've got a couple of people who are trained in that, and that's a core part of what we do, is the vernacular buildings and architecture maintenance.
That's brilliant. I'm guessing those Highland winters will will require having a good team to look after the buildings as well.
Yeah, definitely. They're really they're really put to work.
Fantastic. Does anyone else have any queries to put to Victoria while we've got her with us? Oh, Ree.
Hiya, I'm based at the Museum of English Rural Life. I feel like you might have come to visit us at some point, or some members of your team. But I was wondering, because I was looking at the work you're doing around wellbeing and like peace building and things like that, and I wondered whether you've done anything around, say, social prescribing, because I was thinking with the crafts mental health angle, working with like health organisations. In terms of, the volunteering and stuff like that. I wonder whether that's anything you've kind of worked with.
Personally, no, but probably my colleagues in either programming and volunteering, they'll probably be the best people to speak on that. But I believe so to an extent, but I'm not sure of the details. So it may be that if you want, I could pass your information on to them and they can sort of tell you about what they do, kind of in the programming side of things. I just wouldn't know the answer, to be honest, off the top of my head from my side of things. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, it's my colleague Philippa who works on it more, but I think just a really interesting thing that we were doing this stuff, realizing that it was enhancing well-being, especially using like green spaces and crafting. But then actually working with local or social prescribing networks. And so then we were having people referred for, I know we do Tai Chi and mother and baby yoga and stuff like that, but also kind of using those green spaces as kind of for mental health, or the collections, which I think is, looking at your site is clearly doing that. But it's that's really interesting. I might kind of follow that up to see if there's any, because it was great to see who else is doing similar things in other museums.
Yeah. I'll put my email in the chat as well for anybody and then I can forward on if there was a question I can't necessarily answer here. Let's put
While Victoria's typing, any final questions, queries? I'm sure we can pick them up and in the Gistmail chats as well if anything occurs to people further down the line. Fantastic. There's a lovely link in the chat to what Museum of English Rural Life have been up to as well. So thanks for that, Ree, as well as Victoria's contact details. In that case, I'll draw it gently to a close for this month's Chewing the Cud. A huge thanks again to Victoria for joining us today and for enthralling us with the amazing plans to reawaken Ulster Folk Museum. We look forward to hearing even more about that as the weeks and months progress. But